Mari Fanthorpe, and I'll be your host today. Today we have Craig Murray here from Intrinsic Events, and we're going to be talking about podcasting do's and don'ts. So a lot of you folks have been interested in getting into podcasting. It's a great medium in order to engage with a larger audience, and there's lots of ins and outs on getting that set up. And Craig actually has his own podcast, so we're going to be talking about a little bit about who he is and what he does, and then getting into some of the ways that we can get started, some of the equipment we might need, and just kind of all of those little idiosyncrasies that we should get in line in order to run a podcast. And then, of course, some advice, which we're excited to hear from Craig. Now, if you're new to this platform or you're streaming with us on one of our social media platforms, which is very common these days, you can get your questions answered by Craig by dropping them into the comment section, the Q&A function, or the chat function, depending on what platform you're streaming from. So do drop them in there. I'll be checking it throughout the session, and we'd love to get your questions answered by this podcasting expert. So welcome, Craig. Welcome to Digital Boost. We haven't had you on before, so I'm excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here too. Just as a disclaimer, I'm not a podcast expert.
Oh, here we go.
I've done 44 podcasts so far since November last year. So I'm getting more familiar with the platform and the type of content, but I'm happy to help.
Well, I reckon between the two of us, obviously Digital Boost has a podcast on Digital Boost Live app, and I've been doing a bunch of those and some others on the side for some other tech kind of industries. And so I think between the two of us, we'll be able to have some pretty good insight on ways that you can prepare and get started. And I think you're just being modest, to be honest.
Maybe.
So while I get the chat set up, because I want to open those up and I kind of need to drop off for a second to do that, can you go ahead and just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and what drove you into this space? So I know that you do more than podcasts, so please feel free to share that.
Righto. So kia ora everybody, my name is Craig Murray, and May last year I moved out of a regular job, which was with the Rotorua Economic Development Agency, and went all in on my event agency, which is called Intrinsic Events. So I dream up ideas for events and then try and create them. I also manage existing sort of established events as well. One is the giant 2W Gravity Xero, which is happening next Saturday. This time last week, we were wondering whether or not it was going to happen or not, and it's happening next Saturday in Rotorua in the Whakarewarewa Forest. We've got 700 riders, 100 staff, and it's pretty cool that we're actually going to do it, but we've only had a 2-week turnaround to get that one over the line. So the Intrinsic Events, we do music festivals, we do music sort of infrastructure events, we do consultancy work for sort of venues and people who are looking at trying to upscale their events in their venue or location. We also do an event called a New Zealand Small Business and Entrepreneur Festival. So there's one in Auckland on the 7th to the 9th of November this year, the Vodafone Event Centre. In April next year, we've got one in the TSB Bank Arena, and we are going to announce a Christchurch or South Island one for July 2023, which is super cool. So where I started, I've been working in the events industry since 2003. I worked with Surfing New Zealand was one of my first event businesses or companies or associations that I worked with, and I helped put up flags and tents and help with Surfing New Zealand events. For about 5 years, ended up being MC and running the events as well with the cool team there. And I know Ben Kennings is still in that team there, which is super cool. I moved sort of into, I owned a nightclub or started up a nightclub, and it was a venue. So I got international DJs or promoters to bring DJs into the nightclub or bands, and had like things like Shapeshifter and Trinity Roots and Cornerstone Roots and those types of bands and DJs from all over the world come. And so that was my venue. I owned a venue, which is quite cool. I lived in Raglan and owned a venue in Hamilton.
Oh, living the dream.
It was good fun. It was good fun. And then I moved down to Wellington and worked for the Wellington Regional Economic Development Agency. And they owned or managed, I suppose, 7 massive venues. So the TSB Bank Arena, the Shed 6, Academy of Fine Arts, St. James Theatre, Wellington Town Hall, and the Opera House. And our team's role was to put as many events in there as humanly possible, whether they were ticketed conferences, single day meetings, seminars, or whatever they are. Then I moved up to Rotorua into a role here where I live in Rotorua now. And that was with the Rotorua Economic Development Agency, which was at the time a council-controlled organisation. Now it's a limited liability organisation. And my job there was to encourage people to bring their conferences to Rotorua. Conferences is a big industry. And over a 5-year period, I helped convert $105 million worth of business and 270,000 room nights for the city, which is quite cool.
Yes.
And then, like I said, in May last year, I decided to go, no, my side hustle, which was running events, started getting more and more events coming on board. And I was like, no, it's taking up too much time. I'm sick of working till 1 a.m. I'd rather just sort of not do that and work full time in there. The very, very long answer, I started podcasting because I had to reschedule my New Zealand Small Business and Entrepreneur Festival event in Wellington twice. And then the third time now it's in April next year. So I was like, how do I create value for my audience? And a perfect way to create value is to interview awesome people from around New Zealand who have been entrepreneurs, or they've started a business from zero, a founder, and exited out. So I've had guests like Justine Troy and her husband, who were the founders of 42 Below Vodka, and just talked about how they started the business in their garage in Oriental Parade and how they ended up selling it for $135 million to Bacardi 10 years later, and their marketing tactics and some of the cool strategies that they did, and some of the innovative marketing things that they did that made the brand, and it sort of like changed the liquor game from what it was to what it is now.
What a great story.
Yeah.
You know what? I feel like lots of Kiwi stories start with a shed, you know, lots of Kiwi dream stories start with shed, duct tape, possibly, you know, that kind of thing. There's amazing innovation that comes out of New Zealand. Like, all joking aside, but
I actually think a lot of startups start up from garages. If you jump on a podcast, and it's a real cool one called How I Built This, and a lot of they start in the garage or in a bedroom, and then scale up, and they end up with 1 staff member, 2 staff members, 10, 50, 20, 100, and then your Facebook.
And then that's it's a good point that, you know, you can start from something really small and scale. And so a lot of times we're kind of impressing upon folks here, like, get your system set up from the beginning if you can, you know, like just some of those foundational things, so that as you do scale, you've got it all you've got your structure built to scale, which can be really helpful when you're on a roll, instead of being like, I've got to develop all these systems now that I didn't have before. But okay, so you're into podcasting because it's adding value to your clients, I guess, or to people who you want to engage with your events and things that you're doing. And obviously so many people are going to resonate with the fact that their businesses took either a dive or had to pivot, as we use that word a lot, due to COVID, and events is no different. Now, so you obviously started your podcast on your own, and like getting that all set up. What kinds of information do you need in order to just even get the plan together to begin a podcast, would you say? Google.
It's the best way to start. How to do a podcast. Literally, that's what I did. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I'd probably consume anywhere between 5 and 10 hours of podcasts every week from other people's podcasts. It's just a format that really helps me, and I call it passive learning. So I thought that there's probably a lot of other people out there who would be interested in that type of style of learning as well, because you can hang out the washing and then listen to something and then learn a little bit. So I'm a big Gary Vaynerchuk fan. I don't know, but anyway, to answer you don't know who Gary V is?
Terrible.
Oh my goodness!
I say something terrible?
Gary V, Simon Sinek, Seth Godin, all these people are really, really, for me, they really help me out. But the information that you do need, to start with Google. Like that, most of your answers can be found on Google or YouTube. But what I did find was that there's a number of different platforms that you record your podcast on. One, there's StreamYard, Riverside, Zoom, Teams, all like what we're on now. And you can press record, and then you can record it. You can pull out the audio and just use audio for Spotify and sending it to Spotify and all those sort of platforms. But you need to have a platform where you send your audio or your WAV or your MP3 file format to. And there are a number of different ones. So I use Anchor because it's free and it's unlimited. There are other ones like Buzzsprout, Podbean, but if I was to recommend anyone, it's Anchor, ANCHOR.com. Jump on there. That's
your recording platform. That's what you use for your recording.
No, that's not what no. So for recording, you can use Zoom or anything like that. I use StreamYard.
Yeah. I use Restream. So
yeah, Restream, yeah.
I want to take a step back because I think like before recording happens, we have a lot of things that we need to do. Like, what's the name of your podcast going to be?
I gotcha. We'll go back there. Yep.
Yeah, like all the way to the beginning, because a lot of folks, they're just going, I think I have some value, but I don't know where to start. And it starts with, what is your theme? What are you going to talk about? Who's your audience? Identifying that audience and coming up with maybe, I know that when we started doing the Digital Boost podcast, I didn't realize that how much actually goes into it. You even need to think about like, what's your intro phrase? Like, do you have a catchphrase that you use on every single one of your podcasts? We say, learn it, do it, boost it, like that's a part of our slogan of what we use before every podcast. You have, or people say, welcome to the podcast. You have like a little script that you use almost on every podcast that is your intro or something like that. Do you use one? Because I know we do. I know a lot of podcasts I listen to use things like that in order to get it started. But it came down to figuring out what kind of content we were going to do, plan out the content, the different topics. Then we set out what are our standard questions going to be that we're going to ask some folks that come on. And then we kind of, as we developed that, then we started to figure out how we're going to record and, how we're going to edit these things and what platforms we're going to put it on. What was your process for your podcast? Did you have a structure like that? Not everyone does. So I'm interested to hear your plan. I'm a bit of a structure nut.
I'm very much fluid. And with my ones, and but I did have one the ethos behind this podcast is to add contextual relevant business information that's going to add value. It's not a sales pitch. I'm not telling you to come to my festival. It's just this is information that I need help with. So if I've got questions, I'm assuming that there's other people out there that've got questions too. So I'm like, I've got a question about employment law. Email an employment lawyer. Hey, I've got these questions that I think an audience out in New Zealand would like to be answered. Would you be interested in answering these questions? One was about the new mandates that will be changing in April and how that could impact a business, and do I have to lawyer up and those types of things, or so my one was really focused on adding value for businesses, and it was part of a marketing tactic called content marketing, which is creating value for your audience. Without doing any sales, because I have been in sales. I worked for Coca-Cola for 5 years. Everything is sort of in sales, but it's I suppose a strategy where I'm just adding value. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just saying, hey, look, here's some awesome information, and it will hopefully, if it's so long as that the information is as awesome as I hope it is, it'll add some credibility to the brand, which is SME Festival. And then when it does pop up and say, oh, look, I've heard about that because they've got a cool podcast. So if I rewind way back, I do have questions that I pre-record. I have always. So there's some sort of structure to the podcast. Yeah. So I always asked, what was your first ever job? Your first ever job, the first job that you got paid for. And then how does that roll into and then if you could roll into sort of your professional career origin story and how you ended up to be where you are. And then it's a really cool, a lot of people did everyone did normal things. Like one person I spoke to said, well, this is funny, but I used to get oranges and lemons for my next door neighbors and sell them to other people down the street. And I was like, wow, you're an entrepreneur from the get-go.
Yes. There's always those kids, aren't there?
Yeah, there are those kids. And then, so I have 2 or 3 questions I always ask. but then you need to get it. I also ask questions that are relevant to that topic. So there's a hook that I can pull that content out of the video and use it to promote the event as well. So I could be like, say, what's your single most valuable piece of advice you'd give to a small business owner right now if they're just starting? Or a question like, there's a lot of businesses out there who have been through hard times and they're almost at the end of their tether when they're deciding whether or not they're going to forge on and try and make it, or just pull pin and then just deal with what they've got. What would you suggest? And then
I think like I want to cut in there because you've got two really good pieces of advice there.
Yeah.
And one of them is that, you know, having some preset questions that you use throughout all of your podcasts, and then the rest is kind of tailored to the topic, is a great way to have this continuity, this sameness across your brand. You know, it's almost like a bit of branding in a way. And then the second bit that you put in there was the fact talking about repurposing content. And so like making your life a little bit easier by, hey, if I ask this question about, you know, what piece of advice do you have for small businesses? Because I actually asked that question on all Digital Boost podcasts as well. It's a great way where I could actually chop up that single answer and use that bit of audio content and put it somewhere else and use it as some of my content for my social media, or I could use it as a teaser to get people to come and listen to the podcast. So it's a great way to like reuse some of your stuff so that you don't have to constantly be creating, which is, you know, it's just, I think because you've been in marketing so long, you know, you instinctually kind of go, yep, you know, but I just wanted to slow it down for a second.
Sorry, I do go fast.
Miss that because that's such a valuable bit of information that you put out there. So I guess like moving from that, so that's kind of like your framework and, you know, understanding why you're doing something is super important, how you're going to draw people in, how you might use this content later. So let's move on to some of the platforms that you would use to put your podcast on. So, you know, like Spotify or things like that. What platforms do you use? Do you use all of them? And how did you come about choosing that?
Cool. So there's a real simplified way to be able to do that. So there is a centralized platform called, I use Anchor.
Okay.
So
this is the Anchor. Okay.
Yeah. So I pull in my audio to Anchor, and then you write your heading, which is, you know, it could be like podcast and do's and don'ts with Craig and Anna-Marie, and then you write a bit of a blurb and links down the bottom in the blurb, and then you press publish, and then it spits it out to Spotify, Google, Apple, Amazon, any sort of platform you apply to be part of. So rewind back, what you got to do is you set up a profile on Anchor or whatever one you decide to choose, Buzzsprout or whatever Riverside. They're all pretty good. Some of them are cost. Anchor's free, so I like to use things that are free.
Things that are free.
I like things that are free that work well, and they're equally as good as I was using a paid option, and I only had a limited amount of hours per month for the podcast, and I do 2 hours a week, which is it's a lot, but
it's a lot. Yeah.
Anchor's epic. Like and the cool thing about it too is that it's got a dashboard where you can see how your podcast is performing, how many views you can see how the retention rate. So by that I mean like how you might get 100% of people start listening to it, and then 3 minutes in, it just completely dives, and you've only got 10% people listen. So you got to start looking at it and go, why on earth is that happening?
Yeah.
Is it my voice, or is the content that I'm delivering too boring, or is it the question? Like those are the questions you got to ask yourself. What you really want is that you've got like 60 to 50% of people listening for 37 minutes, which is quite hard to do. But if you get into that, then you obviously what you're delivering is aligned to the audience who you're trying to talk to. So you sort of apply it's not apply is probably the wrong word. You just go through a process to put your podcast onto all the other platforms like Spotify, like I said. But before that too, you've got to be able to record the audio and chop it up as well. So that's it sort of sounds a little bit daunting when you starting to think about editing audio files and things like that. I use another free platform.
I'm gonna make a list.
Another free platform. Oh, it's not even a platform actually. It's just a straight download onto your laptop, which is called Audacity. So Audacity. So you like this. Like this is getting recorded right now. I'm pretty sure on a Zoom you can download audio and video. So the audio would probably come down in a wave. There's probably a number of different formats of audio files, but there's a wave or an MP3. Audacity and all the apps, they generally want an MP3 file format. This is getting quite tech.
Yeah, I almost want to go back to the fact, because I know that when we started the Digital Boost Live podcast, we had to apply to Apple and apply to, but like to get it. So if you go with Anchor, do you not have to apply to those?
Yeah, you still do, yeah, but they make it make it really easy. So there's this thing called RSS. I don't know what it stands for, which is basically the URL from your podcast, and then it'll have in one of the pages, it has all the options that you could possibly think of that people consume podcast content, and then it'll give the instructions of how to do it. So go press this link here to send your podcast to Google. Press this link here to
that's
go
through Anchor.
Yeah, that's all through Anchor too.
Okay,
And
all right,
and
that's so easy. Wow. Yeah. Okay, that's great.
It takes a little bit of time initially to get it set up.
Yeah, it does.
But then it's everywhere. So then you do it once. It might take you a couple of hours, maybe 3 or 4 hours, whatever it is, it's worth it. And then from then on, every time you upload an episode to Anchor and you press publish, it'll automatically just spit it out to all of the platforms, so you don't have to worry about that again. And also, if you're writing, you can even change it too. So if you've changed, like what I also do is another little tactic. If I see a podcast that's not performing very well, but I thought that the content's really cool, maybe the headline's wrong. So podcast and do's and don'ts, it might have absolute rubbish amount of listeners, and you could change it to say a quick and easy way to get your community to listen to you, or something like that. And then all of a sudden you might see a spike going, oh wow, that's working. And it's all about headlines. And we did a podcast literally about headlines only. That's it. The one thing we talked about was headlines. Super niche, detailed 12-minute podcast that's saying this is what you should be thinking about when you're writing a headline. You need to try and get someone's attention, and they reading that headline, they can instantly understand what this is going to be about. So this one's obvious: podcasting do's and don'ts.
Yeah, obviously. And I think that ties into almost all content that you're putting out there, having something that's going to catch your audience. And we talk a lot about using sites like Answer the Public, find out what questions people are asking. And if you put that question, what they're Googling, and if you put that question into your actual topic title, then, people go, oh, that's what I've been looking at. They might type it in and your podcast pulls up, or, those keywords can play like a major role in people listening to what you've got to say. So I love that tip about Anchor. That's really cool. And you were saying that so I use Restream to record. Now, Restream is something that we also use that integrates with Zoom, that pushes it out onto our social media platforms, but you don't actually need Zoom to use Restream. Restream is its own platform as well, and you can separate. What I like about it, you do have to pay for some features. It does have a free angle to it. It will allow you to separate the audio. So if the two of us were talking right now, I can go into Restream and download your audio and my audio separately, so that like our editors like to have that as if there was like a mock-up or a sound in mind, they could cut mine and stream
dull out the background noise
together. So it makes it a little bit easier to edit. And you were saying you use Audacity to edit.
I do. You can upload directly, you can record directly from Anchor. So literally you could open up your phone, right, and just press record, and then you're recording a podcast there. And then you don't need fancy equipment to start a podcast. That's one tip. I started with a really slow laptop, and then I upgraded the camera. I just recently upgraded my microphone. I've gone from having where are they, like big headphones like these to just little earbuds, because it's like it does the same job.
That's right.
And yeah, so all you need is a phone. It's all you need, phone and earbuds and some Wi-Fi, and you can podcast.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great tip, because a lot of us don't have a lot to start up with. And so that sounds like, something we can all manage at this point. It's pretty much almost imperative that you have a phone in these days. So we've talked about platforms, and now you're starting to touch on equipment, and I'd like to kind of go into that a little bit deeper. I know I use a snowball mic. So I've got this blue snowball mic, and it has some things there. But to be honest with you, when I do my podcast, I actually use my earbuds as well, because I have tested the quality of the sound between my not ear pods. I would say when people come on with the ear pods, the sound quality is not good, but just the regular old school headphones with the mic that drops down by your mouth, the quality is great.
It does the job. Yep.
Yeah. Now, I this is a tip I'm going to throw in there. When I record, I actually close all, like if I've got windows, I close all the curtains, because I don't want the sound to bounce off the windows. And then I'll often put pillows around my computer, because it absorbs any sound refraction. So it's not it doesn't look very cool, I'll tell you. When
someone walked in, you're like, what's going on?
What is she doing? She's sitting in the dark, she's got pillows everywhere, and that's how I do it, so that the sound absorbs, and it works really well. It's actually a little bit of a joke in the podcasting community, I think, where people will take pictures of like their kids' toys, soft toys that they've placed around their mic to absorb sound and stuff. So for you, is there any tips you have there about the way that you record and how you put yourself in a space to be able to record?
Nope. No tips. No, I'm sorry. No, there is. So the best thing you need to do, and the most valuable piece of information you need to have good internet. If you're recording video like this, and if you're just on Wi-Fi and you're too far away from the modem and it's average, you'll be pixelated, and then you'll be up. You'll pause like that, and then it'll catch up. So what I do, I went to JB Tech or whatever it's called, and just bought a cable. It cost $20, I think, that can run from directly into the back of the modem into my laptop. So I've got a 20-meter cable, so I can go into the garage, go into wherever, and plug it in straight into the laptop, and then I've got high speed. So generally, if you've got a regular sort of internet connection in your house, your speeds are about 100 up, 20 down, or the other way around, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's the download speed versus the upload speed. So your upload is like what you need for video and, all that kind of stuff. Downloads like Netflix, you know what I mean? If you want to watch Netflix, like that's great. But if you want to do something like this, you need a decent upload speed. Go on, because I could talk for days about this. It stresses me out.
So the simple solution for this one was I just called my provider and go, hey, this is what I need. This is not fast enough, because it's not a constant as well. So 120 is what they aim for, but they're not always delivering that. So if you're in a neighborhood where your next door neighbor's a gamer and our mate over the road's always on Netflix, it could be impacting your connection. So I asked for super fast. What's the fastest you could possibly get? And it was extra $7 a month. And it was 900 to 400 speed. So it's like super fast, ridiculously fast.
Yeah.
Which means like, I don't actually know what it means, but what it's done is not, I don't freeze like that anymore. I also upgraded my laptop to have a better graphics card in it, so it can deal with this type of content. The one I did have, it was just old, and it had all my files were stored on the laptop, which was slowing it down. So now I use an external hard drive of 1 terabyte. So all of my information is not even on the laptop, it's on other things. So if the laptop crashes, I've still got it saved as well. So those are a couple of tips, which are they're not like a huge investment, I suppose, as a cord. I'll
tell you what, I bought the cord. I've got a cord, and I bought the adapter so that I could plug it in, because a lot of the newer laptops. Like I was having a problem with my computer where I couldn't update to the new Zoom because my computer couldn't handle the update. So I ended up having to get a new laptop because I just couldn't get that. And it's a part of my job. It's what I need. I need that platform.
It's a tool,
Not every
right? Yeah.
platform needs that.
Mm.
So I bought an adapter and I've got my Ethernet cord. That's what it's called, like an Ethernet cord. And I just plug it straight from the wall. It runs down, the room, and I plug it straight into my computer, and it will change your life with your speed. It's so good. You don't have to stress as much. And if you don't have that plug in your computer, you just go to some place like, what are some JB Tech or one of those places, and just show them your computer or show them what you have, and just ask them if they have any adapters that'll help you to set that up. Because there's nothing more stressful than having your computer constantly freezing when you're trying to have a conversation. Right? It's just, you can't.
Yeah, especially if your audience or the other person is like saying something real epic, you're like, oh man, this is so good content. And then they go,
yeah,
exactly. You're like, oh no.
That's so true. It's so true.
Like, oh well, I don't
want to miss a moment.
There's different ways you can fix that, right? So you can't fix them freezing because you can't re-record that. But what you could do is jump onto Canva, another free platform that's really, really cool, and then put go into YouTube thumbnail, get an image of them, drop it on there, talk about it, and then just put the audio in the back of that, and it's just a flat image, and the audio is going on it, and then it will just look like you're an absolute pro and nothing's gone wrong. But that in the background, listen, you're like, damn it, that was the best bit of information you said.
Yeah.
So there's definitely different tricks around, and that actually we might talk about that later on. But when you're creating your content or taking snippets out, but you pull me back, because I'll go.
No, that's okay.
I'll go way ahead.
I feel like we're ready for that. We've talked about, like you don't need to have a fancy setup, and I think that's a good place to start. I don't want to get too crazy about equipment and what equipment you should invest in. I think the more you get into podcasting and you start to get into the podcasting world, you connect with other people that are podcasting, and they'll give you good recommendations for possibly what you're trying to do in your setup. So I feel like let's go into a little bit of the editing, because the editing part is, people think, oh, I'll just whip out a podcast. Yeah. But actually there's a lot involved. So yeah, for your podcast, you said they're about 15 minutes in length?
Oh, no. So I wish they were 15 minutes. Cracky, that'll be easy to do.
Yeah.
I do two. So on a Monday, we do more tactical, detailed information about that are going to help a business right now. So on Monday, this Monday coming, I've got one that I asked. He's a business coach, and he's specialized in sales. So I'm asking him 4 specific questions, and that's all I want him to answer. So that they're bite-sized bits of information that you go, oh, okay, cool. And it's about sales process, sales funnels, and blah, blah, blah. On the Friday, my ones are more aspirational, inspirational, where I chat to epic Kiwis that have done super cool things, and just talk to them how they've started and why they started, some of the challenges that they faced on the way, and then I just go off on a tangent with them and go, oh, so tell me a little bit more about that. And those ones are normally about 45 minutes. So there's another free app. Jot this one down too. It's not even, app's probably the wrong word. DaVinci Resolve 17 is a video editing suite that is amazing, and it's free, absolutely free. It is epic. You can create a Hollywood blockbuster. I think they do. They use the high end, but it's got every single bit of capability that you need to be able to edit a video like this. Start putting in words. You could disappear, fade in, fade out, whatever you want. So what I actually do is, I'm going to rewind back to editing, because this is I missed this step completely. So I edit video and audio at the same time, and I put it into DaVinci Resolve 17, and I edit the video to how it's going to be. I take out the ums and the ahs, and when people stop and think, and condense it up. So it sounds like I say a lot. If you listen to my ums, I probably said about 150 of them already. I try and get rid of them as the ones that you can, and make the video seem nice. And then I pull the video out and the audio out, and then I edit the audio again. So I do double editing for my audio. So the audio is specifically going to Spotify, so they can't see people. So I can chop bits out, and it doesn't look like I'm a robot because I'm chopping out really bad parts.
Yeah.
And then my YouTube clips is a different sort of podcast to my actual Spotify one. So I would actually, I'm pretty fluid when it comes, like I said before, about I'm just trying to figure out what's best for this podcast. And I'm forever changing it to refine to find it so that my audience has a consistency and they know what to expect when they're listening to it. So they're going to start with this, they're going to talk about this, and he's going to ask these 2 questions, so I can fast forward the first 5 minutes because I don't want to listen to that. I just want to listen to the person talking, not about the stuff and all the sponsor stuff and things like that. So normally I try and find a nice cool bit, a really epic bit of knowledge, and I'll put it in the front end. Like it could be like let's just say Justine Troy, she's like, and then I sold it to Bacardi for $135 million, and then we bought this, and then let's say it was that. That's a pretty dumb thing to say, but I'll put that to the front, and that might be the hook for people to listen to. And then I'd say, hey, that was Justine Ross. She was the founder of 42 Below Vodka. In this episode, we got this. This is what we're going to talk about. Tune in, and then we'll go straight into the podcast.
Yep. Like a bit of an overview, of what happened in the podcast. It's almost like you record that after the fact.
Yeah, I do now. So I find out
at the beginning either. We used to just go straight into it and that was it. But like our newest podcast, that's what it's we don't really give an overview, but we give a little bit of information about who we're talking to, what the content is, and any extra bits. And I think like that's an important point, is that you can evolve with your podcast. Like, nobody expects you to be perfect. There's
my first few,
trying to be perfect.
I listened to a couple of my first ones. And I was like, oh my God. I actually, first one I did was with Cassie Roma. Have you heard of Cassie Roma? She's epic. She's in the brand. She's Kiwi. Oh, she's actually an American Kiwi. And she's in the brand development and storytelling space. She's super cool, epic first guest. And I blew it. I reckon I did. But it's the first one. So it doesn't matter. Like, who cares? Like, what? It's
just
actually
get out there. Just do it. You did. When they said, "Oh, we're going to do a Digital Boost podcast," I was like, "Oh, okay." I'd listen to podcasts. Like, we'll figure it out. People always think that, like, oh, you've got a big brand or whatever, you must know exactly what you're doing, but it's not always the case.
No.
And
you just like anything, you start at the beginning. And I'll give you an analogy. So I taught Kyokushin karate for a number of years, and the very first lesson for kids, I used to say, I used to get a bottle of water, and I'd say, this bottle of water is half full of water. See? And they'll be like, yep. I go, so this is what you think you know about karate. So now I'm going to empty this bottle of water out, and then this is what you know about karate. Nothing. And now I'm going to try and refill that up with information that's actually going to help you learn about this particular art. And it's the same as anything. So you start with not knowing much at all, or maybe you think you know a little bit, but then you realize actually I don't know much at all. And then you relearn, and then you start. So at the moment, I'm an orange belt in the let's say in the podcasting world, and I aim to be a black belt, and that's probably not going to be for another 10 years time. But I'm learning as I go, and just don't be afraid to make mistakes, because you'll figure it out. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Another person won't listen.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, like, somebody's going to love you. Somebody's going to find some enjoyment out of your session.
All right, now, and then you get some
that's
comments.
Lots of advice. I feel like we've given heaps of advice there. And I think, like, maybe because we've done the advice section, maybe I think, do you have any don'ts? Do you have any don'ts that you really think are hard no's? Like, don't do that, that you would say, I've seen people do this, it doesn't work, or anything like that. I'm just checking if there's any questions on that.
So one of the things I think, not be prepared.
That's right.
Or give your guests the opportunity to be prepared. So pre-prepare your questions so that because if you throw some questions that, like, some people are sweet and they can just answer away and just go for it, no problems at all. They're professionals, but other people need to to have time to download what you're going to ask them and be pre-prepared, and don't assume that that person is going to be the person who can just answer the questions off the bat. You can feel them out a little bit as well throughout the way. So you can either stick to your script or go off on a tangent, and you'll be able to figure that out with the person. Don't assume that your Wi-Fi is going to be okay, because it won't be. So make sure that you're as close as possible to the modem as you can be, and don't have multiple windows open at the same time as you're doing a podcast. So shut down all your windows. Don't have YouTube playing. If the kids are watching some Netflix, just asking, hey, can you just look, you can watch a movie after this, but I just need 35 minutes to do this podcast. So make sure that there's not that much traffic going out of your own household, that's some key tips. Have earbuds in. And the reason why you have earbuds in is you can hear, and then sometimes if you're talking and your microphone's picking up what's coming out of the laptop, it'll reverberate, which means it'll be like, go, like that. And that's terrible. You don't really want that. So the sound is really important. The deeper and the clearer your audio is going to be, the more likely people are going to listen to you, because it does sound a bit better. But it doesn't mean you need, like you said, earbuds are fine. I've just upgraded my microphone. Costs $400, so it's quite a lot of money, I think. But it's I'll turn it away so you can't. But it's a Shure MV7. It's what Joe Rogan uses.
Getting into it.
Oh, yeah. There you go. But I started with a microphone that I bought that I had no idea. The Blue Yeti is a good one. A lot of people use. I think they're about $200.
They're not too much of an outlay, but I don't know why we have those. It just is what we had in the office, so I grabbed it. But I don't use it for the podcast. Actually, I just use my headphones. I find I've done sound checks and sent it to our Benji, our editor, and he's just like, actually, your headphones sound better than them, like, just because it keeps all the sound really close to your face, and it must just sound clearer. It's not much of a difference, but he said if I had to pick between the two, I'd pick that one. Yeah.
I'll carry on with the do's and don'ts, because I just thought about a few more.
Oh, do it. Yeah, let's hear it.
Don't do one podcast and then do another one in 3 months. You may as well just not do them. So turn up and do them on a regular, because that's how you're going to grow your audience. You might start with like Gary Vaynerchuk. You don't know who that person is, but no one knew who that guy was 10 years ago. And now he is the most listened to one of the most listened to podcasters on the globe. He's Vaynerchuk, VaynerMedia has got 2,000 stars, blah, blah, blah. He's a good podcaster to listen to. But turn up, be a specialist. So if you're the person who's asking the questions, make sure that your audience knows that they're coming to your podcast for a specific reason, whether it's you're going to be talking about Star Wars figurines, or you're going to be talking about how fast the grass is growing, or fishing, or whatever that might be. Sort of stick to your topic so that your audience is going to understand, I'm going to listen to John Doe's podcast about how to build a fence, and he's going to tell me whatever.
There's some really good topics. Yeah.
Well, like if you're
somebody's going to listen to it, I'm telling you. Yeah.
Okay. So this is the marketing side of a podcast. If you're a handy person, and you do fences, driveways, clean roofs, all that sort of stuff, you could do a podcast and then talk about what you should be doing in these seasons. You could boost that podcast and promote it on Facebook and geo-target it around your area, and tips and tricks, and then you will pick up business from it, because people will know that, I've just listened to Jane, and she's got a new business where they fix up fences, they clean roofs, they get the lichen off roofs, they do your gutters, they paint your house or whatever, and she's saying that we should do this. And this type of, she's not telling you that I should do this, she's saying that you should do that, but maybe you don't have time to do that, so you're going to give her a call. That's how a podcast can work for marketing.
Yeah, love it. I love that. And I think that there's some really great examples. Like, just do some Google searching, just go on to some podcasts, maybe in the same area that you're interested in, and check out what they're doing and listen to it. But don't, like, the way that I kind of got my head around it was I wasn't listening to the podcast for the content as much as I was listening to it for the structure. And, how does this work? Like, what are the components that I need for this to kind of be a podcast, and look for those commonalities, and and I think that give it a go. And I love those. I love all of those do's and don'ts. And I love the preparation aspect, because I think I think that was a really key element. Giving the person you're interviewing the questions ahead of time not only allows them to prepare, but it also allows your recording to be somewhat seamless. You know what I mean? It really helps on the back end with editing. If they know what they're going to say, they don't stumble as much. A lot of times they've had enough time to kind of prepare in their mind what they're going to say. And so they don't stammer and stumble and have big blocks, because they're like, oh yeah, here she goes. She's going to answer this question. She's going to ask me this question now. And I'm going to go right into it, because I've got all my thoughts, my ducks in a row, as they say.
Also, I definitely do. And I felt that this is probably the most do thing I would recommend. That doesn't make much sense, that word, but is to give yourself 5 minutes, talk about the podcast, let the person know that this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. Feel free to make a mistake. If you want to re-answer a question, it's super easy for us just to edit that bit out. So don't feel like, oh man, I wish I answered that differently after the podcast. Just do it again. It's all good. It's really like, once you figure out how to edit, it's like control / play, control / delete, and you pull that bit out. That's literally how quickly you can edit a podcast. So make your guests really comfortable and empower them to answer the questions to the best of their ability, because you don't want to make anyone nervous, and it makes you nervous, and then you're all freaking out, and then it's going to probably not be as cool as what it could be. So, like, as an example, my first one, I was so nervous. I was like, my face was red. I had a blanket around the back of me too, so no one could see. And I went, oh, I've got to make it like, but then I like mine being like, if my kids come in while I'm doing a podcast, that's all good. I'll be like, hey, Malachi, how's it going? Yep, you can watch some TV. Where you go? Because it's authentic. It's who I am. And that's it. That's just me. I wear a beanie and glasses. I'm not going to wear a shirt because this is who I am. I'm not going to pretend I'm someone else just because I'm on a podcast.
And we only use the audio of ours currently. But one of the things that I found was that being able to see somebody while you talk to them is really important. Like a lot of people, one of the podcasts, I think the first one I ever did, we didn't turn on the cameras. So we were like, oh, we don't need the camera, so don't worry about turning it on. And we started it out with like the first question. I was like, this is just too weird. Just turn on the cameras. We're not going to use the video, so don't worry about what you look like, but if we can see each other, you can see when they're going to pause or when they're going to, so you can have a little bit more of an organic conversation. You can give some energy with your smiles or your encouragement to your guest so that they feel really welcome and they feel like safe, but if you can't see somebody, it's just, and you're talking to them, it's very different recording than just being on the phone with somebody, you know what I mean? It just feels, I think it creates a level of welcoming when you can see somebody. So that would be my do as well.
I suppose we'd call it manaki here, right? And also another definitely do is make sure you got some water next to you.
How thirsty do you get when you record a podcast?
I've drunk a coffee on this side and I've got a water on this side. So make sure you got it, or you want a wine or a beer or whatever, however you roll, you just roll the way you roll, but make sure that have some sort of liquid there for you to drink, because if you're talking for 49 minutes, we've been going now.
No, I'm thirsty.
You do start getting dry throat, and then it does. You can start hearing it in the mic because your mouth will be making different noises. So have a sip.
Absolutely. Have a sip of water. I just mute myself when I want to have a drink of water. I drink a lot of water on podcasts, and I don't know why versus these, but maybe it is the constant banter. This has been an amazing little session we've done here, Craig. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're looking forward to when that SME festival does come around, because you kind of briefly just SME festival. Look, there's a small business festival that happens and was supposedly going to happen a couple of times.
Yeah.
And it keeps on getting pushed out and pushed out. But we are very keen to hear when it does go live. We definitely want to promote it here on Digital Boost because it's something people could actually go and attend. And it has great value to our users. So we will let you know, as we know, as Craig knows,
I know when it is.
Do you? I feel like the world's opening up. I feel like we're in a good place. We're moving forward.
Yeah, so I've locked in a venue in Auckland, 8th and 9th of November this year, the Vodafone Event Centre.
Awesome. We should definitely do a set. We'll do maybe like just a little shout out closer to that time, just so that everybody remembers, because I know that's a ways away, but great to hear that that's happening. And maybe if you're, not in Auckland, you might be able to come into town and check it out. That'd be really cool. Like, let's gather, let's get back to a little bit of normal. Hey,
well, there's a virtual element too, FYI. So you
really?
Yeah. So
here we go, Craig. Pulling out the stops.
If you think about the audience that was going to attend an event like that, not everyone can afford to go to Auckland from Wellington or Manawatu or Christchurch, but you can. I want it to be accessible for everyone. So there's options for online, which is pretty nominal sort of costs, and there's different entry fee levels based on the inclusions that you get. So not everyone needs to eat food there. You can bring your own lunch. Doesn't bother me. But then that's just the most valuable piece of information you're going to get from these festivals is the content and the people that you're talking to, the connections you're going to make, and the workshops.
Yes, I'm so excited right now. That just made my day. I'm really excited. I mean, I'm based in Auckland, so I will be there in person. I'm looking forward to it because I know last time I spoke to you when we booked this session, it was like, oh, it won't be till 2023, or, it was really being pushed back. So I'm excited for you. I'm excited for all the participants and everybody who's involved in that festival and all of the great content that's going to come out of it for SMEs here in New Zealand. How fantastic. Let's end on that note. It's too good. Craig, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks everyone for joining us. I can see you on the social media, just chilling out there. I've been checking to see if there's questions. There hasn't been, probably because I feel like we're answering them as we go. But if you do need any help, contact support at digitalboost.co.nz. We'll be happy to kind of go through that with you. I've made a note of a lot of the platforms that Craig mentioned today, and I'm going to create a list with links and give it to our support team, and they're going to put it up as a learning summary underneath this video on the website, and I'll try and drop it into the chats as well if you've been tuning in on LinkedIn and Facebook or YouTube. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Ka kite.